So let's look then at stories that are making headlines around the world. The Financial Times says Borris Johnson has been given a boost after Nigel Farage's announcement the Brexit party would not contest any of the 317 seats won by the Conservatives at the last general election, while hinting he might withdraw even more parliamentary candidates. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the search giant Google is engaged with one of the US's largest healthcare systems on a project to collect detailed personal health information from millions of people across 21 US states. But according to them, the patients have not yet been informed. ABC News Australia is looking at the predictions of catastrophic bushfire conditions in New South Wales, saying they have materialised, with properties destroyed, lives under threat and communities on Sydney's fringes being told it's too late to leave. And staying with weather-related stories, the Washington Post says up to 400 weather records could be broken this week as temperatures continue to plummet across much of the central and eastern US. And then the Daily Telegraph is asking, how woke are you going to be this Christmas, as environmental charities suggest you swap glitter and excess for rented trees and e-cards. Well, Oliver Cornock is back from Oxford Business Group. Oliver, let's get stuck in. Many of the papers in the UK, of course, are focused on the general election, and Nigel Farage in particular, his announcement yesterday that the Brexit party, some 300 candidates, would not be going against the Conservatives.
Yes, and this has been billed by the Financial Times and other newspapers as a boost for the Conservative Party, and in some ways it certainly is. It is helpful. The argument, though, of course, Sally, is that it's those contested Labour seats, those marginal seats in Brexit, pro-Brexit areas in the Midlands and towards the north of England, which would be a much more helpful move were Farage to step back and allow the Tories just to contest those, because, of course, this election, unfortunately, is about one thing in lots of ways: Brexit. And of course, I think the broader story about Nigel Farage, of course, is he's quite a one-issue man. He's the former leader of the UK Independence Party, pro-Brexit, now this new iteration of that. And I just wonder whether this is perhaps a reflection of the realisation that the British people are now sick to death of this. There's been 3 years of stasis, and that the only way of getting beyond this is a majority in the House of Commons to get things moving. And I just wonder, that's pure speculation, whether there is a realisation that this sort of one issue now is perhaps begun to run its course.
Well, I was going to ask you that, actually. Why do we think he's made this choice now? But as you've already answered that question, the question is, will the Conservatives benefit from this to a great degree? We won't know until the results come in.
Boris Johnson has pursued an aggressively pro-Brexit pro-Brexit stance. I mean, he's been very firm on that. He hasn't done it yet. And I just think that he's almost called Farage's bluff on this.
So we shall obviously cover every twist and turn in the run-up and then see what happens. It's not far away at all, 12th of December. Let's now move on to the Wall Street Journal. Google's Project Nightingale, that's what it's called, gathers personal health data on millions of Americans, and apparently, according to these reports, they don't know about it.
And Sally, this is the issue, isn't it? So yet again, it's a big tech story. There's actually so many positive angles to something like this, yet the consent and the ethics side of it haven't been thought through. It has to be a real worry for anybody in the tech sphere, the big data sphere, which is what this is.
Well, you say a big worry for anyone in the tech sphere. I mean, most of us use Google, whether we like it or not. We might be using search, maps, mail, all sorts of things. And
that's, in a sense, what I'm saying. I should have put that clearly. You know, we are all part of this. And again, it comes down to the consent element. Now, actually, some of the benefits of a huge census of information would be very positive in terms of public health. Google, of course, set itself up was founded on the basis of managing information. Some of us might argue it's mismanaging at the moment. Interesting angle from the business side, though, as well, Sally. Google is slightly behind its rivals in terms of the cloud computing, other areas. Amazon have stolen a march on that. Apple, Microsoft. I think this is quite interesting. It's Google's cloud service that are managing this. And interestingly, again, the parent organisation, Alphabet, have permitted everybody within its organisation, everybody under that umbrella, to have access to this. So the ethics are really, really grim, but actually the access and the potential positives, were it handled properly, could be really significant.
And also the issue of, to what extent this is monetised and to what extent this could have future implications for individuals if they want to get health insurance or that kind of thing in the United States. There are so many different implications about this. But I don't know about you, when I go onto a website or I'm searching, there's always that question, accept this, accept that, and you just quickly click on accept just to get to the point where you want to be.
I agree.
Without reading the pages. It's true, isn't it?
And I think
so they could argue we have had consent, not in this particular case, but in many other cases where you might think, hang on a second, they're using my data.
Well,
we unbeknowingly maybe just hit that accept button.
That's the argument of Facebook. That's the argument that I've heard Trump many times, that, we get everything for free on the internet, but actually nothing's for free.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. Right, let's look then at the Sydney Morning Herald and the press right across Australia completely trying to keep abreast of this terrible bushfire weeks. This is called catastrophic, it's called unprecedented. Even the edges of Sydney at risk. Yes, this catastrophic category of fire warning is something that's quite new in a country that's, let's be honest, very familiar with these dreadful fires. I think it's fascinating that it's now lapping at the doors of Sydney. It sounds like. I mean, there's 78, I think, overnight warnings. It's the beginning of summer, not the middle or the end. This is being stoked, of course, by weather that's extremely hot, extremely dry, no humidity, and of course, it's not the right time to talk about it. But one does need to consider what can be done to prevent these in future. Green margins, irrigated areas. There needs to be some planning here, some population management. There's an interesting angle in an American paper I was reading about how actually indigenous Australians have managed fire very well historically. I wonder whether there's an argument for sort of harnessing some of those more traditional techniques. I mean, it's quite interesting, as you say, because this has to be looked at in terms of future planning, doesn't it? Not just for Australia, but other parts of the world where we're seeing what is an annual event because of our climate getting warmer is becoming that much more catastrophic and far-reaching. We've seen it in California with the fires there as well, with President Trump accusing, the mayor of the governor of the state of California of not planning well enough, not doing things to prevent these from spreading as much as they are. And we live in quite an overpopulated planet. The UK, Sally, where we live, we've got flooding at the moment, and we've been building on floodplains. But at the same time, we're looking at this story in the Washington Post, which says nearly 400 records for cold could be broken this week alone in Washington state. Yes, extreme weather conditions are impacting every corner of the world now. And as you say, it seems to be happening very regularly. We talk about this sort of month in, month out. This Siberian Express that's hitting a huge swathe of middle to eastern America quite early as well in the winter season. Coming up to Thanksgiving as well, you wonder what impact this will have on sales figures, people getting out, although I understand that there'll be a milder swing coming back. Back in Europe, you wonder whether there's going to be we often get the tail end of these weather patterns as well. But yeah, again, stepping back, Sally, this is something that's a theme, isn't it? And we do need to start planning for that. You wonder about retrofitting buildings, all of these sorts of things, especially when you couple that with our impact on the environment as well, the sustainability. So, very cold weather, you have to then get heating. It's all part of the same cycle. All part of the same cycle, and it's what we were talking about earlier, this issue of trying to cool down our planet with all this evidence to show that it's having a huge impact on many parts of the world and catastrophic circumstances for many. So this moves us neatly onto our next story, which is in the Daily Telegraph. Oh, Christmas tree, how sustainable are thy branches? I think it's quite an interesting angle, not least on the Daily Telegraph, which has traditionally been fairly cynical when it comes to environmental issues and so-called woke areas. It's really interesting. I think part of this election, part of the election in the US, we're seeing a lot more focus on this sort of area. It's stories we've covered in 3 areas today, including the F1 story. Sustainability is an issue. We do live in an era of egregious consumption. And I think... and this time of year, Christmas... Globally, I know, I'm obviously very aware that many countries and cultures do not celebrate Christmas, but it is a huge event and it is one where we spend, we waste.
And I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, in the Arab world, and I spent a lot of time there during Eid, which is the celebration at the end of the holy month of Ramadan. There was a real move this year to cut back on some of the egregious consumption there. Some of the huge iftar banquets were really cut back, and there was a really conscious statement of why they were being cut back. And I think this is part of the same narrative, and really pleasingly, it does seem to not be just in the UK, but increasingly global.
And there's loads of ideas here. You can rent your tree. That's becoming quite a popular move. So you rent a Christmas tree and it goes back, it's replanted. Many viewers have been in touch saying, you know, we've used the same tree for several years. You can make decorations, you can get natural decorations from the countryside. There's lots of things you can do.
Exactly, and you can share experiences rather than buy things as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ollie. It's been great to have you on The Briefing today.